You want to open up the food?
Do you want me to go first?
Mine is less exciting, so I'll just do
I don't think so.
You all baking this morning?
Whoa.
There you go.
It's like a little platter of
Yes.
nuts, dried fruit.
Yes. So, yes. And apples and Racine Kringle. So has anyone ever had Racine Kringle?
No,
So
I
it's
don't know what
made
that
in
is.
Racine, Wisconsin, which is where my great aunt lived, and I always would go and visit. And they now they have this at Trader Joe's. What? And it's from Racine.
Is it
It's
that
actually
big
from
package?
the town of Racine.
It is, yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
This is just like you were walking through Trader Joe's and just got warped right back.
Yeah,
to
I love
Wisconsin.
it. It makes me so happy.
What's in the tinfoil?
I brought it.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Banana bread. Chocolate chip banana bread.
Did you make that?
Yep.
No way.
I did.
You're so prepared.
I know.
didn't bring
I
anything to this
sometimes
breakfast
bake.
party.
I would say this isn't my best. It's a little dry. But
Oh, really?
It looks good.
yeah, it's not as good as the loaf I made you.
Hello and welcome to The Appetite, a podcast brought to you by Opal Food and Body Wisdom, an eating disorder treatment center in Seattle. I'm your host, Carter Umhau, an artist, therapist, and writer. The Appetite is all about bringing themes from our work as eating disorder clinicians to the greater community. We talk all about food, body, sport, and mental health. So this is a fun day because we have a lot of different intersecting relationships here in the studio. We have Mark Canlis here, who is the co-owner, third generation co-owner of Canlis Restaurant in Queen Anne. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
We're so glad to have you. I used to work for Mark, so this is fun. I worked at Canlis about 5 years ago, and Julie and Kara are here, and they're good friends with Mark. So we've got a lot of different relationships. How did you all initially meet?
We met, gosh, was it around 15 years ago? It was when you were pregnant with your first
Yeah, so 13,
child.
I guess 13 years ago.
13 years ago, we decided, I think a couple of us decided that we wanted to have a couples small group. And there was 5 couples, and we each knew a couple that we were inviting. And so I know I personally didn't know Mark and Anne Marie Canlis yet, but we came together as a weekly small group, and we've been meeting weekly for the last 13 years.
We were like couple setup.
Yeah, couple set up.
I don't think I actually knew you, but
No,
a
we
couple
didn't.
said, you're going to
Yeah.
love this couple.
Yeah.
I feel like I was set up with both
Yes.
of you. Yeah.
We went to
and
Scarlet
and
Tree.
it totally worked. Yes. Yeah, totally.
And how many kids now? We started off with Anne Marie being pregnant, and now there are
15?
15 kids
Like a
amongst.
zillion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's pretty fun. Yeah,
I'm going to expose how I feel about
did
that.
that
But
right.
yeah, no, it could be kind of chaotic. We have a lot of kids.
Yeah.
It's been an incredible 13 years. Getting to know one another and just being committed to those relationships and watching them grow. It's not always been easy, but it's been great. So I'm excited to be here with the 3 of you.
I know. And it's maybe a surprise for listeners to have you on here when mostly we talk about eating disorders, and you have an amazing fine dining restaurant. And we will go into sort of why we think that those two things are actually well married. But it's fun to sort of have these two worlds collide. So we had this idea, Mark, to bring food.
Well, yeah,
as you might know,
you
it's
have
here. So this is a bag.
paper
It's going to
bag
be
there.
a lot of paper coming out of here. So does anyone recognize this wolf symbol on the front of the bags?
Oh, is
Does anyone
this
know what that is?
Is this the place on Stone?
Yes. This
What's it
is
called again?
Seawolf
Yeah,
bread.
Seawolf.
Everyone should take one.
wow.
And it's a croissant. You should take it out
really?
and look at it.
Okay.
I understand some people might have had breakfast, but you should just look at this work of art.
It's beautiful.
So one of the things that, just to sort of anchor this conversation a little bit, one of the things that we are really aware of as clinicians working with eating disorders, I love that you're smiling at that croissant right now.
I'm sorry. Like,
I know.
I knew you were going to say something. I'm like, this is my moment to just eat the big part of the croissant. And then you caught me. You had to say something.
No, it's good. You're
Oh,
beaming.
my
That's
mouthful.
good.
It's so good.
right?
Look at it.
I know. I hope you guys are all now Seawolf fans.
I think, can I coin a term? It was a croissant eruption. That's what it was. It was like this full on
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Carter, where did you want to take us?
Wow, Carter, I like where you're pitching around this.
Well, it's funny. I think what's happening right now speaks to, I think, what gets me really excited in general about food is that it is distracting like this. It's really fun to be in a moment and get to chat with people and say, oh my God, like, no, look at the lamination. Look at that. There's like 60 layers of butter right there and you can see them.
Yeah.
So great. Anyway, what I was going to say probably was that what feels important about this conversation and as clinicians working with people with eating disorders is that they don't get to do this a lot of the time. People that are also focused on their body image, focused on a diet, they're not getting to have these moments of connection or the joy in looking at these layers of butter here and the like crispiness of this dough. I mean, that would maybe be a threat. That would be read as a threat rather than a place to be connected or delighted. And so I think, Mark, for you to be here as one of the co-owners of one of the best restaurants in the country, world, and to be talking about food with us is really special. And I think is a strange, maybe some could say a strange merging of worlds. But actually, Julie and I talked maybe 2 years ago, probably when it had sort of dawned on both of us. We were doing meal outing with the clients together for a few years and taking clients to places. And we talked a long time ago about what it would be like to take clients to Canlis. And for Julie and I think when we were talking about it, and I feel this way strongly, that there would, of course, be sort of a strange thing asking people to come to Canlis and sit there and say, here's the steak knife, here's the bread knife, water glasses go there. But it is also an entrance into a different way of being with food. There's, of course, sort of the fine dining aspect part of it that's maybe not going to be accessible to everybody. But I think it asks people to be with food in a really different way. So even though we're not taking clients to you, it's fun to take you here with us.
I think there is something universal about any of us who are in the business of hosting people at the table. And whether that's, a fancy restaurant or one that is not fancy, it's the same thing. And so we're talking about something that's like universal to everyone. And whether you're doing that out at a restaurant or whether it's at home, hopefully a couple or 2 or 3 times a day, this is something we're doing. We're like being called back to the table and, or to a burrito in your car, whatever. Like, I'm not even so crazy that it has to be time at the table. I'm a huge believer in it, but I also just think there's something, we're not boa constrictors, right? Like, we don't eat a deer and then just digest for a month and a half. Like, we're fragile and there's a vulnerability in that. Like, every day you get hungry and even no matter how much you eat, like the next day you're probably gonna be hungry again. And there's this neediness that we have. And I love it. And I think that is, that's Canlis and that's the pizza shop around the corner and that's a taco shop and a burrito. Like, it's all the same thing. So,
and the table at Opal, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
meeting people at such a vulnerable place where they don't really want to come to the table.
Yeah.
But that we will continue to provide that consistency and presence and environment that would allow for them to maybe reset that and think about the table differently.
And I think that's, you said, Mark, that there's a neediness that we sort of can't get away from of being hungry. And I think that it's also sort of a relational neediness too that I think we all get confronted with, whether or not we grew up having family dinners or not. Some sort of neediness that is often, it can be something that is found in receiving or giving food. Like, I need food from you. I need to sit down and have food. As a child, someone's going to give me food. You can't get away from that. Yeah. So when I worked at Canlis, a striking piece of art in the space was the corridor at the front of the restaurant. And I believe that it was your mom or your parents that put it there?
Yeah,
Okay.
she fell in love with that thing.
What is it?
So a corridor is the innermost, you guys, I'm no historian here, but essentially in ancient Japan, everyone keep their most valuable possessions in one space, in like one treasure house. And this was the innermost of 3 doors. So it was the last barrier between what you held most sacred and the world, right? Whether that was a flood or a fire or a thief, we communally kept our things together in this safe place. And Mom, I mean, it's made of like Japanese cypress. It's a beautiful thing. But on hearing the story, she just was like, oh, that is what we are doing. And it just, it spoke to her. And she said, this is what a restaurant does. And this is what a restaurant at our caliber should be doing. It's holding sacred and protecting the valuable things that people bring us. And whether that is your time or your money, you know, we charge a fortune to dine there. Whether it's your like daughter's only 16th birthday, right? Like these things we don't get back. And that's really, I think, the gift of trust that a guest is giving us is by saying, hey, look, tonight really needs to matter. Like I can't do this again. And I came to Canlis because I was really hoping, I was really believing that it would be safe here, right? It's not dissimilar from saying, I'm going to take this family heirloom, this treasure, I'm going to place it in this place. Is it safe? Like, yes, you know, we've got this corridor in front of it. And I really, I feel like that's what's common to everyone who walks in the front door. They all have this, this common need that tonight needs to matter. And I think that unites us in a way. And I think that's a lot of what you feel when you're in the restaurant is you feel this sort of 150 people all with a common need. Kind of like when you get on an airplane. Everyone needs to go there. You know what I mean? And it just brings this kaleidoscope of different kinds of people. And they're sitting there and it's like, okay, we're all in this together. Literally, this tube way up high in the air. And a restaurant is similar in that way. It's like tonight, whatever, it's your birthday and it's your anniversary and it's, you know, your son's birthday. And it's just like the two of you sitting there and you don't get that. You don't get that again. And I think it's a reminder to us to just sort of say, this is what we're actually doing. We are making a safe place for this stuff to happen. So it hangs there, right there in the entryway. And yeah, it's been a cool symbol for just what we hope the restaurant can be.
And it's still there?
It's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, totally. We haven't moved it.
That makes me feel safe.
Actually, right after you left, we took it down. Yeah. Like, you know, Carter's gone. It just doesn't feel the same. Yeah. Yank the door. I don't want you to feel bad about that.
Oh, God. That's a very heavy thing.
It's a very heavy thing.
I think that safety is a really important cornerstone when we talk about being around the table. And I think particularly with eating disorders, there's not a lot of safety, I think, that people feel in their bodies, that they feel around food. And I would also project saying like that they don't necessarily feel around other people. That sometimes the food can be the way that they manage the anxiety of being there, period. So, Julia, I'd love to hear from you kind of like how you see these two worlds colliding, particularly as a dietitian.
I see it so many ways, I think. I have, like Carter mentioned, sort of dreamt of the day that we could take clients to Canlis, and Mark, you would have to be there. But and maybe that's because that makes me feel safe in that same way. But I'm like, Mark would make them feel welcome, would allow for them to see food and the table differently and like bring something to that moment. But it also has always felt too risky, right? Because not everybody's ready. Isn't maybe ready to receive that. So maybe it'd be something as a graduation. Somebody get to a stage. But yeah, I see us aiming, I guess, in the midst of the treatment table, like the table that we eat together and dine together at Opal. I see us trying to bring that same kind of safety and that same kind of connection, and to renew, I guess, what relationship around the table could look like. And so I think ultimately to allow for people to go to the pizza shop or to fine dining and be able to engage in humanity in the way that is just keeps us going, literally physically at the cellular level keeps us going. And then also at the emotional and relational.
At the relational level, it keeps us going, right?
Yes.
Like it's something that you need. Like we're built for and structured and created to be in relationship. And this is, this is one of the few times you get to do that intentionally. And, the table is not a safe place. Interestingly, you said, I would want you to be there. I think what happens here, like it's kind of, let's just be honest, like I got to look at you and you guys are all looking at me, and it's this turning towards. And the mission of the restaurant is to do that, right? It's to inspire all people to turn toward one another. And to me, that is this sort of, whether that's the physical thing of actually turning our body towards one another, or really more the relational thing of being able to stay present with. A table does that. It is inviting you to stay turned towards people, and that is vulnerable. Like sometimes I want to hide. I want to turn away. I am not ready for this level of being seen and being known. And whether it's not like, croissant crumbs in your beard, or like, or broccoli in your teeth, or whether that's probing and you asking questions, and I have to like sit there and really be present with you and really answer this question. Like all of that to me is the magic of what is happening, and you're doing that while you're breaking bread, banana bread, so to speak. I just think that we need that relationally, and we have so many excuses not to spend time there.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been hearing at different points in this conversation is our clients that struggle with eating disorders definitely say no to food and say no at the table a lot. So I'm envisioning the invitation for tea or the decaf coffee at the end of the day. There's no's a lot around food. And I think also the no's to connect and to look at each other and be present. And part of recovery so much is just allowing one to say yes and be present and see what might come. So if somebody comes to this table right now and says yes, does it mean that they eat something of all of it and overdo it and, distracted by the food and can't even stay connected to the conversation? Maybe. But it also can mean coming and saying yes and ending up with crumbs on their plate and bites out of everything, but also that's a yes. And so much, I think our clients fear that they're just going to be just taken by the food, and the food is going to be the thing that's going to overtake them.
Oh man, yeah. The food is not the thing.
No.
If I could have people hear one thing about the restaurant, I would say the food is not the thing. And I would say that with Chef sitting next to me and my arm over his shoulder. And he knows that. I think it's why we love him so much. We all get that. And I love your idea of saying yes. Every night I meet someone who says to me, I waited my entire life to come here.
Wow.
And it's like, whoa, right? That's not about food. We're not at all talking about eating right now. We're talking about like, I have driven past your restaurant and I've always wanted to come, and tonight is the night, And so the food is just a way to honor that. And I don't know what she's talking about. Like, I don't know why tonight versus the last 50 years of you driving up or down 99. Like, I don't know what's going on. And maybe the guy is standing there and he either he feels shame that he hasn't brought his wife in, or he feels embarrassed that he never could afford it, or he feels like the other 49 anniversaries. Like, you don't know what's happening. You don't understand the dynamic. But there's this huge desire to take anything you have in your pocket and like present it to them and say, oh, I have this. I have like a table with a window, or I have Carter's your server, or I have like this really special dish we've been working on forever. Like, it's this desire to sort of to like uphold and honor whatever's going on in their relationship. And it's not about food. It's like, oh gosh, all we have is 16 dishes. I hope one of them works for you.
No,
and
that's
that to me is like what the wine list is about. Nobody really cares about, like, I don't care about 100 pages of wine. I don't. I care that like the one night that I go in with my brother, Brian and I just realized we've never dined there together alone, which is crazy.
What?
Our parents were already there. We can talk about that with a therapist later. But we just, right? And so here we were at the table, and our wives were like, have you guys ever done this? I'm like, no, we haven't. And we wanted to order a bottle of wine, and we wanted a wine that like, that kind of stood for what we were doing.
Yeah.
And it's not about the wine. It's about, hey, I'm sitting here in this restaurant that I've like sweat and blood with my brother, and we've never really done and so the wine in that way is honoring the people. The people aren't honoring the wine. And even though the wine sits there in the middle of the table and you're all like focused on it, or the candle or whatever it is, it's not so that we put our attention on that thing in the center of the table. It's that the thing in the center of their table reminds us to stay focused on one another. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I get to visit maybe the most like hallowed vineyard in the world, and spend some time with the winemaker. And it's at a place in France called Domaine de la Romanée-Conti, right? And we're standing in this vineyard called Romanée-Conti. Okay. So these bottles are like just stupid expensive. And he took us downstairs, and we're in his cellar, and he's opening up this wine. And Dad, who's with me, like our whole family, in his best French, is trying to say, like, put the brakes on. I'd be like, no, like, not for us. Like like that's not. And the winemaker essentially says, you have no idea. So I make this wine, and I'll tell you, it's worth nothing in the bottle. Now we're sitting in a cellar where like every one of those bottles would sell in the restaurant for $1,000 or $5,000, right? Like they're clearly worth something. And the winemaker, the creator of this thing, is saying they're not worth anything in the bottle. They only gain value when they're opened and shared among friends. He's like, that's what I created them for, right? So that just sort of understanding around, it wasn't that the winemaker knew what you'd be doing with it. He just wanted to put the best thing he could in that bottle so that 5 years later, when you pulled it off the shelf, it would honor your desire.
Yes,
does that make sense,
absolutely.
right? And I think that is so much about dining in every meal. Like whether that's like your mom's, meatloaf that she puts out there. Like it's more just like, hey, the meatloaf is saying, come home. Like, let's face one another. Like, let me hear, I don't know. Let me hear where you're at. And, there's this, Henry Nouwen writes this book, which is like Mark Canlis sized. It's like 62 pages, right? So can you drink the cup? And I love it because it was sized just for me. And in it, he talks about toasting. And I think just the wine thing pulls it up, but we all have coffee cups, right? So if I had a pot of coffee and Kara, I poured you some, and then Julie, I poured you some, and then I poured you some, and I had some. Right, they're not going to be the same. And what I love about this is that, of course, with wine, you don't fill the cup all the way up, right? And so I just see this symbology of, well, you gave me my portion, and then you also didn't fill it up. And I just think that's us at the table. Like we arrive with like, this is who we are, and this is who we aren't. Like this is what I have, and this is what I don't have. And the toasting is sort of an acceptance of that. It's like, this is me. I did great in a soccer game today, and I failed my math test. Like I did great in this conversation, and I just got too angry at my kids in that one. Like it's sort of coming together and saying, this is all I got. And I'll hold that up with you, and I'll hold that up with you, and I'll be seen in that way. Like that to me is what the table's about. Isn't it about all this yummy food in front of us?
Yeah.
It's that the food is just celebrating our willingness to be present with one another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I feel like the sad part too is that those that struggle with eating disorders feel like their presence at the table has to be perfect, and it has to communicate exactly what they want it to communicate to those around them, by the choice that they're making in terms of the food, or the way in which they behave, and the way that they might say something, and just that tyranny of having to have it be perfect and exactly the way that they want it to be. Robs them.
Well, it sounds like that's more than even just like who doesn't want to not show up perfect, right?
Yeah.
like I think we all just want to arrive that way. I don't want to be seen for like any of my insufficiencies.
Sure.
I want to show up at the table and look gorgeous. I want to show up at the table and sound great.
Yeah.
I do not want to be seen for all of that other stuff. And yet, like, here we are, hungry again. Like, we need to eat.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, in one way, like the control that is often there, or maybe sometimes the lack of control that is there in an eating disorder, keeps you very much from presence. And even though we're talking about so much of this both being the food and not being the food at the same time, I see another place where it's sort of not the food and is the food, in that it asks you to be in your body in a way that is maybe messy, like the crumbs, and, being distracted by how freaking good this croissant is, like that you're there and also don't have total control at the same time, because your senses have to show up and they're giving you information. It's not just about like, I'm going to be sort of in this box of experience right now and come at you with this perfect thing to say, and I know what's going to happen. There's a bit of lack of control that has to happen when you're in your body that is where you can be connected. I've been wondering, Kara, about you. And
I'm so enjoying this.
I know. I've been wondering, we don't necessarily name this a lot, but you have a background in marriage and family therapy specifically. And I'm curious what you think about sort of the role of family or how family plays into this idea of being around a table, particularly as we think about Thanksgiving coming up. And
I mean, I guess what I'm really, I don't know, it's hard because what I'm syncing up to is more my own personal experience, I guess, of being at the table with the eating disorder and being in this moment, engaging in food and conversation and people in such a different way. It's such a different felt experience than it was in the past. And so I guess that's what I'm distracted by, to be totally honest.
yeah, tell us about that.
Talk about that, Kara.
Yeah, I feel like that's where my mind is.
Go there.
Yeah, so I do think, as Julie's talking about our clients, I have that lived experience of seeing, like, if I would have been at this table, in my 20s, I would be completely distracted. 90% of my thoughts would be on this food. I would be, it really did pose a threat to even my system, my body. And I would have been concerned about, I remember even looking at food, I would think I was gaining weight. Just noticing anything that I would just equate to my body will get larger as a result of eating. And thinking about the table and the strategy and how do I appear quote unquote normal. But I'm terrified to put any of it into my body and certainly not present to the people in the conversation in any way. And it makes me just sad. Like I see kind of Julie tearing up as she's thinking of our clients. And it's sad to approach the table in that way. And then to know now, like what a difference it is to, I'm just getting pleasure watching Mark and Carter talk about these croissants, like there's so much more beyond, even within the food, to enjoy and to seek the pleasure and live with that being safe and okay. And then it just it takes its kind of place as part of the experience, right? I think of when you recover from an eating disorder, food it goes back to it's part of it, but it goes back to its rightful place versus it being kind of this massive, the only thing that you can see at a table. And then once you have safety with food, then there's all these other ways like you're talking about that you can be safe or not safe at a table in the presence of people. And so, certainly now I can experience the variety of that, of who I'm with and what we're talking about, and maybe my desire for particular levels of connection and conversation, and what happens if it doesn't come, and sort of, like those just such satiating moments when you're like I think of every year we do a Friendsgiving meal with Mark actually and his wife, and there's 10 of us that do it, and that's one of those just satiating rituals that we have, that we're with dear friends, we feel safe as a couple, we feel known as a couple, my husband and I, and we're enjoying remarkable food with people that love food, and it's part of the experience, but not all of it. And that's, to me, like on the one end of the continuum of feeling known and safe and loved and full. And then there's obviously that can't be every meal. Like there's going to be meals that are just, like he said, a burrito in a car. There's not. It's not all gonna look like that.
You say Thanksgiving, Friendsgiving. Yeah, we call it Friendsgiving, but I wasn't even thinking about that. And then the minute you said it, I did not think about food.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about the relationships. I thought about the anticipation to be together. I thought about what it's like. Sometimes, we've done that in a formal setting. We've done non-formal, like everyone dressing up, and how that's like honoring one another in this sort of weird, old-fashioned way. I think of so many other things than the food. And sometimes it happens at Canlis. Yes, so the food should be good, but it's not. Gosh, it's not about that for me.
I was gonna ask about that actually, with sort of the difficulties of family sometimes. Just, I guess, wondering for people that are listening that wouldn't necessarily have a Friendsgiving or wouldn't necessarily ever go to Canlis, but how do we encourage people to be in some space of seeking that kind of connection? I know that we do that a lot in our work with clients, for sure. But I feel right now sort of a deeper sense of the soulful connection that is required and that we're talking about. And I'd love to hear if you all have ideas about this. Like, what would you say to someone that maybe doesn't have a community that they feel close to, and maybe can't think of a restaurant that they love or that they could afford to go to? But what would you want to tell someone to do around Thanksgiving in order to be sort of in this spirit that we're talking about?
I think one of my favorite things in the world is Tim's Cascade jalapeno potato chips.
Oh yeah,
and
they're good.
You can't eat too many because they could wreck you. But it feels like, I don't know, for me, it feels like cracking a cold beer and opening a thing of potato chips is this special moment. It's like this me moment. And sure, we could all envision this sort of like Martha Stewart, Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving table where there's, an infinitely perfectly brown turkey and like 52 dishes. I also feel like Thanksgiving is a cold beer and potato chips, and that you could sit and you could say, I'm doing this for me. I am thankful for this, and this is my ritual right now, and that would be a feast. I think the feasting that's going on there is the making space for yourself and kind of opening your heart up to just saying, like, this is what I have, and I am thankful for it. And whether you have much or whether you have little, it's the exact same feast. Do you know what I mean? And how many people do that well with little, and how many do it really poorly with much? Mm-hmm. Like, I think we see examples of that all the time. And so that's a reminder to me just that it isn't about what's on that table or who's around the table. Sometimes it's just about like approaching it with the right spirit. Mm. And I would desire that for anyone going into the holidays. I think is the freedom to approach that table with the right spirit. It says, this is what I have and I'm thankful for it. Like, that to me is the magic of that holiday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Carter, you were asking about the like marriage and family therapy side.
Yeah.
And I think of with family systems, going off of what Mark's saying, is there is so much pain when it comes to the holidays within family systems. And there can be a lot of grief. There can be a lot of disappointment, trepidation, not wanting to be with, like maybe wanting to avoid the family gatherings. And so I think I'd echo something that Mark said about there's always an invitation there if you are more present with yourself, of connecting more to where you are in whatever stage of life you're in, to connect with yourself, to be more present with yourself. And that is something you can bring regardless of who you're around and the disappointments you're around. And it's okay to be, most people have disappointments. There's not this perfect family that all the needs are getting met from your family of origin. That is not, that's more of a fantasy. And so knowing that that's probably a fantasy for everyone.
I've been living a fantasy.
Yeah. it's a fantasy.
I'm not gonna have all my needs met.
Yeah, no, it doesn't happen that way.
No.
So that to know that we're all not alone in that, but then how do we connect back to ourselves and bring kind of a more authentic experience for ourselves in the dining experience, which might be you leave your family table and you go for a walk by yourself. You take the moment to kind of respect that with what you're going through, even if you're not going to get the validation from the people around you.
Yeah, and that reminds me, Kara, of Mark's comment about the toast. Like, it's a moment to say, this is where I am.
Totally.
Like, this is who I am. This is like where I've been and maybe what I want, or I don't know.
Right. It's an honoring of what is.
Yeah, exactly.
You're kind of blessing what is instead of what isn't. And I think for my own self, like, it's so easy to focus on what isn't, what I'm not,
right,
what I'm missing, right? And I don't think that's, there might be maybe time and space for that in other places, but to me, that's not the table. It's certainly not the Thanksgiving table. Mm-hmm. Like, that table is to bless what is. And I think it's hard. Like, it's hard to want what you have. And, because often what we have, like, isn't awesome. Like, it's like either broken or messy, but then I think in so many ways it is. And sometimes we need, like, we see that best reflected in the people around us at that table, like who are able to actually see you and be like, actually, what I see is amazing. And it's not so bad over there. Like, you know, from where we're sitting, we really like that. And I think we see that at the restaurant actually all the time. We see this sort of transformation of people who came in scared. I would say that most of my guests come in feeling fear.
Yeah.
That they're not enough, that they don't belong. Like when I walk onto an airplane and walk past first class, I say to myself, like, oh yeah, these are not my people. Like, this is not my place. Like, this is not my thing. And I think most people walk into the restaurant that way. Like, most people that dine there are not billionaires, movie stars. They're just like us. They are like normal people who waited most of their lives to come in for a special time. And yeah, there's a fear there. Like, will I be accepted? Like, am I enough to sit here? And resounding, like Canlis would say, you're enough. Like, you're exactly the person we were hoping. Like, you're exactly the person that belongs. And I don't think that's a Canlis message. I think that's like one that we all need to hear. And I think I just run a company that way because it's deep down like what I want to hear, and it's deep down like what I want the people around me to hear, which is like, no, you are enough. Like, this chair was for you and that table was set for you. And it's hard to hear that. Like, we need people to tell it to us.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
I want to believe that we also are in a community, in a city with people around us that have that same spirit. And when you asked that question, Carter, of like, what would you tell somebody that didn't have any friends or don't have community? I just think the word ritual came to my mind, which has been said a couple times since then. But I think of what routines are you already doing that you can pause and sit in and keep your eyes up and make eye contact and make connection with the people close to you. So that might be the library, and who's the person that works there when you go there every Tuesday afternoon, or who's the person that you walk by on your way to your work or at the bus stop, and just say hello and have a friendly face, and, you know, just what's that connection. And in that, I just know that there's so many wonderful human connections that can come from the bus drivers and the librarians, of the people that we walk by and we're part of every day, that don't cost us a cent, but that are just a part of our living and in this community. And I want to believe that there are people like us around this table that also have this same spirit to live life this way out there in those common spaces, and want to give that same to the people that they're interacting with.
I'll have to find this article, but my dad speaks to this article a lot. He's always sending me articles. And this one, it talks about how we need multiple different kinds of connection, that we need our most inner circle, we need our broader community, and then we need like the butcher and the baker and the barista, that we have that sort of regular touch point with, that maybe doesn't know the depths of our life, but they're there and they see you. And if you didn't come for a week, they would know.
Yeah,
they would wonder where you were and if you were okay. And they anticipate seeing you, right?
Yes.
We need that sort of knowing as well, and that can sustain us in a different way. Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome.
This feels like such a treat.
This is so fun.
I know.
It is. I wish we could.
We knew you'd have fun.
Stay longer.
It's been a treat to join you.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
So fun.